Welcome everyone to Whimsy Woven Stories. Here, we explore gripping tales of real-life twists. Join our storytelling community.
I'm Amanda, 34, and my daughter Grace is 12. In my family, I've always been the black sheep while my sister Stephanie was the golden child. Last Thanksgiving at my parents' house, I never expected my own sister to humiliate my daughter so cruelly. But the moment Grace ended up crying in that muddy puddle changed everything. I never thought I'd see the day my quiet husband, Michael, would be the one to finally put my entire family in their place. Before I tell you how he completely flipped our family dynamic that day, let me know where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members. Growing up with Stephanie was exhausting. She's 2 years older, always thinner, always prettier by our parents' standards. From the time I was a kid, my weight was a regular topic at the dinner table. "Amanda, do you really need another roll?" my mom would say, while scooping extra mashed potatoes onto Stephanie's plate. By the time I was 10, I'd already learned my body was something to be criticized. Stephanie used that to her advantage in middle school. She and her friends started calling me Piggy. When I came home in tears, my dad told me to grow thicker skin, and my mom said maybe I should try harder with my appearance if I wanted to be treated better. No one ever told Stephanie to knock it off. High school was even worse. Stephanie was homecoming queen, class president, and graduated with honors. I found joy in art and writing, but those things were brushed off as cute hobbies. Meanwhile, her achievements were celebrated with parties and expensive gifts. Even at my graduation dinner, my parents spent half the night talking about Stephanie's scholarship. On my day, I met Michael in college. He was different, quiet but confident, and he saw me for who I was. On our third date, I nervously ordered a salad, and he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Order whatever you actually want. I asked you out because I like you, not because of what you eat." So I got a burger and fries. And for the first time in forever I felt like I could breathe. When Michael met my family that Thanksgiving, he immediately saw the dynamic. Stephanie joked, "Wow, Amanda finally found someone willing to date the chubby sister." Without missing a beat, Michael said, "I found someone with a beautiful heart, kind of rare in this family." The room went completely silent. That was the moment I knew he was the one. We got married after graduation, despite my mom hinting that I should lose weight first for the pictures. Stephanie, of course, wore white to the wedding, as a bridesmaid. Michael just held my hand and whispered, "She's just making the contrast between outer and inner beauty even clearer." When Grace was born, I made a promise. The toxic cycle would stop with me. I swore my daughter would never think her worth depended on her size. For years, we limited contact with my family. We built our own traditions and surrounded ourselves with people who valued kindness. Grace grew up confident, creative, and full of joy. But when she hit 10, she started developing a body type more like mine, shorter and curvier than most of her classmates. I started noticing that familiar look of self-doubt in her eyes. We talked openly about body positivity and how health isn't about appearance, but it was clear the outside world was getting in. And then my family made it worse. At a barbecue the summer Grace turned 11, my mom looked at her second hot dog and said, "You should be careful, sweetie. You don't want to end up struggling like your mom." I pulled her aside immediately and told her body comments were off limits. She acted offended and claimed she was just looking out for Grace's health. Stephanie was even worse, constantly comparing Grace to her daughters Emma and Lily, who were naturally slim. "Maybe they can give Grace some fashion tips," she'd say, like Grace's clothes were wrong just because they fit differently. As Thanksgiving approached last year, I seriously considered skipping it. Michael and I talked about starting our own tradition again, just the three of us. But Grace said, "I haven't seen Grandpa in forever, and I want to show Emma and Lily my new art portfolio." Her excitement made me cave. Kids are resilient, I told myself. Plus, Michael promised to stay alert and have my back if anything went south. Thanksgiving morning was chilly and gray. Grace was so excited about her outfit, a burgundy sweater dress, black leggings, and little ankle boots. She'd even asked to use a bit of my mascara. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I told her, and I meant it with everything I had. Michael kept the car ride light, cracking dad jokes that made Grace roll her eyes and laugh. But as we turned onto my parents' street, lined with big houses and holiday decorations, that familiar anxiety tightened in my chest. Michael reached over, squeezed my hand, and said quietly, "Remember, if it gets bad, just give me the signal. We can leave anytime." I nodded, silently praying it wouldn't come to that. Maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. Maybe my family would finally see how incredible my husband and daughter were. And maybe, through them, they'd finally accept me too. We pulled into my parents' driveway right at 2 p.m. Several cars already lined the street. My Aunt Catherine and Uncle Roger's SUV, my cousin Patricia's minivan, and of course Stephanie's gleaming white luxury sedan parked front and center in the circular drive like a showroom piece. "Deep breaths," Michael murmured as he shut off the engine. Grace had already unbuckled her seatbelt, eager to get inside, even as a light drizzle started to fall. The front door swung open before we even got to it. My mom stood there in a perfectly pressed autumn-colored dress, her hair freshly done. "There you are," she exclaimed, reaching to hug Grace first. "Oh my, haven't you grown?" Her eyes did a quick sweep over Grace's body, just long enough to make my stomach twist. Then my dad appeared behind her, already holding a martini even though it was still early. "The gang's all here now," he said, giving Michael a firm handshake and me one of his quick, half-hearted side hugs. "Everyone's in the living room. Stephanie just got here too." The house smelled like roasting turkey and cinnamon, exactly like every Thanksgiving I remembered growing up. We stepped through the foyer into the large, warm living room, where relatives clustered around catching up. My Aunt Catherine rushed over, gushing about how grown-up Grace looked, while my cousin's kids were in the corner playing a board game. And then, of course, Stephanie made her entrance from the kitchen. It was almost as if she'd timed it perfectly, waiting for our arrival to make her grand appearance. Her blonde hair fell in perfect beachy waves, her slim figure highlighted by a cream-colored cashmere sweater and tailored pants. Her husband, James, followed closely behind her, carrying a fancy bottle of wine that probably cost more than our entire contribution to the meal. "Amanda, finally," Stephanie said, air-kissing the air near my cheeks. "I was just telling Mom I could help fix up whatever you brought for the appetizer table." She glanced at my homemade cranberry brie puffs, the ones I had spent hours making, with thinly veiled judgment. "They don't need fixing," Michael replied smoothly but firmly. "Amanda's a fantastic baker." Stephanie's smile tightened. "Of course, I just know how busy you are with. What are you doing now?" "Still that part-time graphic design thing." Before I could answer, her daughters Emma and Lily walked over. Both tall and thin, dressed identically in plaid holiday dresses like something out of a catalog. "Hi, Grace," Emma said with a confidence only a 13-year-old golden girl could pull off. "Cute dress. Is it new?" Grace lit up. "Yeah, Mom helped me pick it out." "It's very bold," Lily added, exchanging a look with her sister that made Grace's smile flicker for just a second. "Girls, why don't you show Grace the new game room downstairs?" James offered, completely missing the undertone. "Your grandfather just had a ping-pong table installed." The girls headed downstairs while the adults moved between the living room and kitchen. I offered to help with the meal prep and ended up on veggie tray duty, arranging baby carrots and celery sticks, while my mom and Stephanie handled what they considered the important dishes. "The turkey's coming along beautifully," my mom announced proudly. "Stephanie brined it overnight using that method from the cooking magazine." "Martha Stewart Living," Stephanie corrected. "The one with my interior designer friend's home on the cover." I focused on the veggie tray, trying to make a nice pattern while keeping my growing irritation in check. "Amanda, you're putting too many carrots on one side," my mom said, leaning over my shoulder. "It looks off. Let me show you." Michael had just walked in to grab some glasses to refill and caught my eye. He gave me our signal, a subtle touch to his ear, asking if I needed to be rescued. I shook my head. It was just vegetables. Not worth starting anything. But the jabs kept coming. Comments about how I chopped onions inefficiently. Questions about why Grace wasn't in any competitive sports, like Emma and Lily. Remarks comparing Michael's practical car to James's shiny new luxury SUV. Through the kitchen window, I saw the kids had moved outside. It was raining harder now, but they were still playing tag. Grace was doing her best to keep up, even as Emma and Lily kept changing the rules anytime she got close to winning. "You might want to tell Grace to be careful," Stephanie said, glancing out the window. "Those leggings look pretty thin, and she's slipping around a lot. Would be a shame if she tore them and didn't have a backup." I bit my tongue. "She's fine. She's just having fun." "If you say so," Stephanie replied with a shrug. "Emma and Lily always pack backup outfits. But I guess not everyone thinks ahead like that." Just then, Uncle Roger strolled into the kitchen with his scotch. "The girls look like they're having a blast out there. But man, that rain's coming down now. Gonna be puddles everywhere. Maybe we should call them in," I suggested. "Oh, let them play," my mom said with a dismissive wave. "Kids need to burn off energy before dinner." Michael reappeared beside me and handed me a glass of wine. "Thought you could use this," he said gently. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I whispered back, even though my stiff shoulders said otherwise. "Amanda," he said quietly, "we can still leave if it gets to be too much." "It's just one day," I sighed. "We'll get through it." But as I looked through the window and saw Grace trying so hard to fit in with cousins who clearly thought they were better than her, I started to wonder if staying had been a mistake. As more relatives arrived, everyone gathered in the formal living room. My cousin Thomas and his wife Beth showed up with their toddler twins, pulling everyone's attention for a bit as they fussed over the babies. I took the opportunity to check on Grace, who had finally come in from the rain with the other kids. Her hair was damp, and I helped towel it off in the downstairs bathroom. "Having fun?" asked gently. "It's okay," she said, but her face told another story. "Emma and Lily kept changing the game though." "That doesn't seem fair," I said. She shrugged. "It's whatever. Can I show them my art portfolio now?" "I brought it like you said." My heart squeezed. Grace had spent weeks picking her best artwork for that portfolio, carefully selecting drawings and paintings she hoped her cousins and grandparents would admire. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "They're going to love it." Back in the living room, Stephanie was front and center, holding court like always. "Emma just made first chair violin," she was saying. "And Lily's coach thinks she could be Olympic level in gymnastics. We're traveling to regional competitions almost every weekend." "Oh, that's wonderful," my mom gushed. "Such talented girls." Grace stepped forward, clutching her portfolio close. I brought some of my art to show everyone," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Oh, how nice," my mom replied, barely paying attention. "Maybe after dinner, dear." "I'd love to see it now," Michael said, stepping beside Grace. "Why don't you show me and Grandpa?" My dad, half listening while watching the muted football game, nodded vaguely. "Art. Yeah, sure. Grace carefully opened her portfolio on the coffee table, revealing a detailed charcoal sketch of our backyard garden. "I made this one last month," Grace explained, pointing to a detailed charcoal sketch. And this watercolor's from my art class. That's really good, Grace, Michael said genuinely. My dad glanced over and added, nice kiddo. You get that from your mom, she used to doodle too. I winced. Doodle, as if both my and Grace's creativity were just some idle pastime, not something to be proud of. Stephanie wandered over, wine glass in hand. Oh, are we looking at school projects? She asked. Emma, Lily, come check out what your cousin made. The girls walked over with visible reluctance. Emma glanced at the portfolio for half a second. Cool, she said flatly. Hey Mom, can we show Grace those gymnastics videos on the iPad? Art's a sweet little hobby, Stephanie chimed in, using that patronizing tone that made it sound like Grace's work was something only meant for fridge magnets. Emma used to love coloring too, before she got serious about her violin. Grace's smile faltered, but she kept going. This one won first place in the school art show, she said, pointing to a mixed media piece she'd spent weeks on. First place at your school? Lily asked. How many kids entered? Before Grace could answer, my Aunt Catherine called out from across the room. Stephanie, we need a family photo before dinner. Bring the girls. The family photo turned into yet another exercise in subtle exclusion. My mom arranged everyone in and around the living room sofa, naturally placing Stephanie's family front and center with my dad seated right next to them. Michael, Grace, and I were told to stand off to the side. Amanda, maybe turn a bit more to the left. Yes, that's better, my mom instructed, clearly trying to make me less visible in the frame. Actually, Michael said calmly but with purpose, why don't Grace and I stand next to her grandfather? Since we don't visit as often, it'd be nice to have a good picture with him. There was a beat of silence before my mom gave a tight smile and reluctantly reshuffled everyone. I caught Stephanie leaning in to whisper something to her. Then they both glanced at Grace with expressions that said far too much. As the group broke up after the photos, I overheard them in the hallway. It's really a shame Amanda doesn't help Grace dress more appropriately for her body type, Stephanie said. Those leggings don't do her any favors. And that hair, so frizzy after being out in the rain. I know, my mom sighed. I've tried suggesting better styles, but you know Amanda, she's always been sensitive. And clearly Grace is taking after her. In size. Froze. The words hit me like a slap. Humiliation, rage, and heartbreak all crashing in at once. Michael, who had heard every word, placed a steady hand on my back. Say the word, he murmured. We'll leave. Right now. I blinked back, tears, my throat tightening. If we do, it'll just prove everything they say about me, I whispered. That I'm too sensitive. That I can't handle family gatherings. Or, Michael said gently but firmly, it'll show Grace that you don't have to tolerate being disrespected, even by family. Before I could respond, my dad's voice echoed through the house. Hey, weather alert says we're getting a heavy downpour. Better bring in anything you don't want soaked out back. I turned to the large window. The sky had darkened into a heavy gray, and the light drizzle from earlier had become a steady, relentless rain. Puddles had started to form all over the backyard, especially a big one near the steps by the back door. Kids inside. All of you. My mom called. Dinner's almost ready anyway. As the children trickled back in from different parts of the house, I tried to push aside the sting in my chest and just focus on making it through the meal. Just a few more hours, I told myself. We can get through this. But the tension in the house felt as thick as the storm clouds outside, and deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that the real storm hadn't even hit yet. Dinner in 15. My mom called out from the kitchen. Grace, would you help set the table? Grace, eager to feel useful, jumped up from where she'd been sitting quietly with her art portfolio. Sure, Grandma. I followed her into the dining room, partly to help, but mostly to stay close and buffer her from any potential criticism. The formal dining table had been fully extended, draped in one of my mom's fancy tablecloths, with her best china and crystal already laid out. It looked like something out of a magazine. The silverware goes like this, I said, showing Grace how to place the utensils. Fork on the left, knife and spoon on the right. She nodded seriously, copying my example with focused care. I noticed how precise she was being, brow furrowed, lips slightly pressed together, as she made sure every piece was exactly where it should be. We were nearly done when Stephanie walked in, sipping from a champagne flute. Oh, you're doing it that way, she said, eyeing Grace's setup. Mom usually places the water glasses on the top right, not the left. Grace froze, panic flashing in her eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't know, she said quickly. It's fine, I cut in. Her placement's correct. Glasses can go either way depending on preference. Stephanie made a small, judgmental hum. Well, in formal dining etiquette, which Mom usually prefers, there is a right way. Without asking, she reached across and started rearranging the glasses Grace had so carefully positioned. I was just trying to help, Grace said softly. Of course you were, sweetie, Stephanie replied with that sickening fake smile. Not everyone learns proper table setting. I made sure Emma and Lily had it down by the time they were 8. I took a deep breath. Creating a scene wouldn't help Grace. Not now. The table looks beautiful, I told her gently. Thank you for helping. My mom appeared in the doorway. Everyone start heading to the table. James is carving the turkey now. People began drifting in from the living room, grabbing seats. As expected, my parents took the heads of the table. Stephanie, James, and their daughters were placed right next to them, in what could only be described as positions of honor. Meanwhile, Michael, Grace, and I ended up on the far side, squeezed between Aunt Catherine and my cousin Thomas's family. Once everyone settled in, my dad stood up to say grace, followed by his usual Thanksgiving toast. As always, it became a speech about the family's yearly achievements. Stephanie's promotions, Emma's violin milestones, Lily's gymnastics awards. They all got glowing mentions. And Amanda and her family have joined us again this year, he added briefly, almost like an afterthought. Food started making its way around the table. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, all the usual favorites. When the cranberry sauce I'd made reached Stephanie, she took a tiny spoonful with visible hesitation. Is this the canned kind or? She asked, letting the question hang there. I made it from scratch, I replied. It's Grandma Wilson's recipe. Oh, brave of you to try that one. It's quite chunky, isn't it? The conversation flowed, but mostly from my dad and uncle debating politics, and from my mom and Stephanie chatting about their social circles. Grace ate quietly, every now and then glancing at her cousins, who were whispering and giggling together at their end of the table. Grace, could you pass the rolls to Emma and Lily? My mom asked. Grace reached for the basket, but her hand accidentally bumped Lily's water glass, tipping it over. Water spilled fast across the white tablecloth. Oh! Lily gasped, pulling back. I'm so sorry, Grace said, panicking. She grabbed her napkin and frantically tried to blot the spill. It's just water, Michael said gently, staying calm. No big deal. But Stephanie was already jumping to her feet. Lily, is your dress wet? Stand up, let me see. It's fine, Mom, Lily replied, clearly embarrassed. It's fine, Lily muttered, though she shot Grace an annoyed glare. You need to be more careful, Stephanie scolded. Those linens are antiques. I said I was sorry, Grace repeated, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. My mom swooped in with a handful of napkins. Let's just get this cleaned up and enjoy our lovely dinner, shall we? The moment passed, but the mood at the table had shifted. Stephanie kept throwing disapproving looks Grace's way, and my daughter slowly retreated into herself, picking at her food, barely speaking, eyes locked on her plate. As dinner wound down, my mom suggested, why don't we do dessert in about an hour? The kids might want to stretch their legs a bit first. It's pouring, I pointed out, glancing at the rain streaking down the windows. They can stay on the covered patio, she replied, brushing it off. No need for them to go out into the yard. The kids were excused, and the adults stayed behind, moving on to coffee and more wine. Michael watched Grace carefully as she hesitated, then reluctantly followed her cousins toward the kitchen that led to the back patio. I was half listening to my aunt ramble about her latest cruise when I heard voices raised in the kitchen. I glanced at Michael. He was already getting up, followed close behind. What I walked into made my stomach drop. Stephanie had Grace backed into the corner of the counter, and Emma and Lily stood nearby with matching smug looks. What's going on? I demanded, immediately stepping next to Grace. Your daughter just shoved Emma walking through the doorway, Stephanie said, arms crossed, voice sharp. I didn't, Grace protested. It's just a narrow doorway, we bumped into each other. I already said sorry. She did it on purpose, Mom, Emma chimed in. She's been acting weird all day because we didn't like her drawings. That's not true. Grace's voice cracked as tears welled up. I wrapped my arm around her protectively. I'm sure it was just an accident. That hallway's tight, and everyone's been moving around. Stephanie's eyes narrowed. Of course you'd take her side. You always make excuses for her, just like our parents did for you. I felt the heat rising in my face. Excuse me. You heard me, she snapped. You've always been jealous of me. And now your daughter is jealous of mine. It's pathetic. By now, Michael had stepped into the kitchen, along with a few other family members who had been drawn in by the shouting. Maybe everyone needs to take a breath, Michael said calmly but firmly. Oh look, here comes Prince Charming to save the day, Stephanie sneered. You two coddle her so much. You're doing her a disservice. Someday the world won't pretend she's special. That's enough, I snapped, feeling Grace tremble under my arm. Mom, can we go outside now? Lily asked, clearly feeding off the drama. Fine, Stephanie huffed. But stay on the patio, it's still raining. The girls headed out. Grace lingered. Go ahead, sweetie, I said gently. Just stay under the covered area. We'll have dessert soon, and then we'll go home. Grace nodded and followed them, though the distance between her and her cousins spoke volumes. I turned to Stephanie. You had no right to talk to Grace like that. Oh please, she scoffed. This is why Grace acts the way she does. You've taught her how to play the victim. Just like you always have. Before I could respond, we heard shouting from outside. A splash, and then a cry that made my blood run cold. Grace. I rushed toward the back door with Michael right behind me. What I saw stopped me in my tracks. Grace was sprawled in a muddy puddle at the bottom of the patio steps. Soaked, covered in dirt, her new burgundy dress completely ruined. Her hair clung to her tear-streaked face, wet and heavy with grime. Stephanie stood at the top of the steps, arms crossed. Emma and Lily were beside her. None of them looked surprised. In fact, they looked pleased. And then Stephanie spoke, her voice like a dagger. Now you're just like your mother, filthy little pig. Her words hung in the air like poison. Grace sobbed harder, curling into herself. Behind me I heard someone laugh. Uncle Roger, I think. Others looked away, pretending not to have seen or heard. I ran down the steps and knelt beside Grace. Mud be damned. It's okay, baby. I'm here, I whispered, trying to lift her up. Mom. Grace choked through tears. Aunt Stephanie pushed me when I tried to come back inside. I stared up at my sister in disbelief. You pushed her. Your own niece. Stephanie, she's 12. Stephanie rolled her eyes. She slipped. And that pig thing. It was a joke. God, you're being so dramatic. Grace sobbed uncontrollably now, her small body shaking in the cold, wet mess. I held her tighter. That's when Michael stepped forward, calm but burning with quiet rage. What did you just do to my daughter? He asked, his voice low but powerful enough to silence the entire patio. He knelt beside Grace, helped her to her feet with such care, and without saying another word, stripped off his clean blue dress shirt. In just his undershirt now. He wrapped the shirt around Grace's shoulders, shielding her from everyone's eyes. Are you hurt anywhere? He asked gently. She shook her head, still crying. Okay, he nodded. Let's get you inside where it's warm. But instead of leading her back through the crowd still huddled at the door, he turned his back on all of them. Michael gently guided Grace toward the side gate. Amanda, can you grab our coats and Grace's bag? We're leaving. His calm tone broke the stunned silence that had settled over everyone. Oh, come on, Stephanie huffed dramatically. It was just a little mud. You're all seriously overreacting. Mom, say something. My mother finally stepped up to the back door, looking visibly uncomfortable. It seems like an accident that got out of control. Grace, honey, come inside. We'll get you cleaned up. I'm sure I have something dry you can change into. It wasn't an accident, Michael said, his voice still calm but edged with iron. And we're not staying. He turned to face the rest of the family, his eyes scanning each of them. For years I've watched how you've treated my wife and daughter. Constant comments about their bodies, downplaying everything they've accomplished, always comparing them to someone else. I've kept quiet out of respect for Amanda and her decision to keep a connection with this family. But today, you crossed a line. The silence was thick. Even the rain seemed to soften as Michael spoke. Michael, my father said awkwardly. No one meant any harm. No harm. Michael repeated, raising an eyebrow. Your adult daughter just shoved your 12-year-old granddaughter into a mud puddle and called her a pig. The rest of you either laughed or just stood there and watched. Tell me again how no harm was done. Stephanie's smug expression had vanished, her face now flushed with embarrassment. You're blowing this way out of proportion, she snapped. It was a joke. Grace is just too sensitive, just like her mother. Michael didn't flinch. A joke is only a joke if everyone's laughing. What you did was bullying, plain and simple. And based on what I've seen, that kind of behavior has been tolerated in this family for way too long. I returned just in time, carrying our coats and Grace's bag, my heart pounding. I felt a strange mix of shame, anger, and a kind of freedom I hadn't felt in years. Michael was saying all the things I'd buried deep but never had the courage to say out loud. Amanda, my mom pleaded. You have to understand, we're just trying to enjoy a nice family Thanksgiving. Sometimes accidents happen, people get their feelings hurt, but we move on. That's what family does. I looked at Grace, still shivering in Michael's dress shirt. Then at Stephanie, who looked annoyed, not sorry. And finally at my parents, who seemed more upset about the holiday being disrupted than about their granddaughter being humiliated. No, Mom, I said, my voice steady now. What family should do is look out for one another. Not belittle, shame, or exclude. What happened to Grace wasn't just some accident. And it's not the first time something like this has happened. It's just the most obvious. Oh, here we go, Stephanie muttered under her breath. Same old Amanda. Playing the victim. Nothing's changed since we were kids. You're right, I said. And that's the problem. You're still the golden child who can do no wrong. And I'm supposed to just accept whatever scraps of decency you decide to toss my way. Well, I won't let Grace grow up thinking that's what love or family looks like. Michael gently placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. We're going home. She needs to warm up and get dry. But, dessert, my mom said weakly. We'll have to enjoy it without us, Michael replied. Then turned to me. Amanda, are you ready? He nodded. Strangely, I felt calm, peaceful even, as if some weight had finally been lifted. We headed for the side gate, choosing not to walk back through the house. This is ridiculous, Stephanie called after us. You're ruining Thanksgiving over a little mud. Michael stopped and turned back just once. No, Stephanie. You ruined it when you decided to humiliate a child just to feel superior. I really hope someday you realize what you lost here. We walked to the car in silence. The rain continued to fall in steady sheets as I helped Grace into the back seat. She curled up, her ruined dress still clinging to her legs. Michael turned on the engine and cranked the heat. After a moment, Grace spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry about your shirt. Michael turned in his seat and looked at her softly. It's just a shirt, he said. You're what matters. As we pulled away from my parents' house, I looked back through the rear window. A few relatives were still standing on the porch, watching us leave. Not one of them followed. Not one of them said they were sorry. And that told me everything I needed to know. The drive home was quiet, except for the sound of rain hitting the windshield, and the occasional sniffle from the back seat. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like peace. A wave of emotions hit me all at once. Anger at my sister, disappointment in my parents, guilt for exposing Grace to that toxic environment, and strangely a deep sense of relief. Relief that we were finally free from it all. About halfway home, my phone started buzzing with texts. I glanced down and saw messages from my mom, my dad, and even Aunt Catherine. I turned the phone face down on my lap. I wasn't ready to deal with their version of events just yet. You okay? Michael asked gently. I'm not sure, I replied honestly. But I think I will be. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of Grace. Her face was still streaked with dried tears, her clothes muddy and soaked, but there was something new in her expression. It was like she was seeing everything differently now. As if the day had opened her eyes to the truth about our family, and her place in it. As painful as it was, maybe today marked the beginning of something new. Turning point. The end of a cycle that had hurt me for most of my life, and was threatening to do the same to my daughter. For the first time ever, I stood up to my family, and I wasn't alone. Michael stood beside me the whole way, refusing to let them treat Grace or me as less than. And most importantly, Grace saw it happen. And that felt like something to be thankful for. When we got home, Michael immediately went to run a hot bath for Grace while I helped her out of her muddy dress. Despite the heat from the car, she was still shivering, not just from the cold, but from everything she'd gone through. "I'm sorry about your dress," I said as I gently laid it in the laundry sink to soak. "We'll try to clean it. And if we can't, we'll get you a new one." Grace looked up at me with tired, tear-reddened eyes. "It's not about the dress, Mom." "I know, sweetheart," I said softly, brushing her damp hair back from her forehead. "What Aunt Stephanie did. It was cruel. And totally wrong. Why does she hate us so much?" Grace asked, her voice quiet but piercing. That question hit me right in the chest. I thought about giving her a softened version of the truth. But after today, she deserved real honesty. "I don't think she hates us," I said. "I think she's deeply insecure. Putting other people down makes her feel better about herself. That's how it's always been, even when we were kids." "But why didn't Grandma and Grandpa stop her?" Grace asked. "They just stood there." That one was even harder to answer. "They've always had a blind spot when it comes to Stephanie," I told her. "They should have protected me back then. And they should have protected you today. But they didn't. That doesn't say anything about your worth. It only shows their limitations." Once her bath was ready, I left her to soak and went to change out of my Thanksgiving clothes. All the while my phone kept buzzing. Eventually I took a deep breath, braced myself and looked at the messages. From Mom. "Amanda, you're overreacting. Please come back so we can talk like adults." From Dad. "Your mother's upset. Call us when you've calmed down." From Aunt Catherine. "Such a shame about dinner. Stephanie said Grace was being difficult all day. Hope you'll patch things up soon." And then, from Stephanie. "Nice job ruining Thanksgiving." Clapping hands. "Thanksgiving ruined by your drama again. Mom's in tears because you stormed out over nothing. You always have to make everything about you, don't you?" My hands trembled with rage as I read Stephanie's message. After everything that happened, she was still flipping the story. Still painting herself as the victim and me as the villain. It was the same script we'd been stuck in since childhood, and I was done playing the role she assigned me. Before I could stop myself, I hit call on her contact. She answered after 2 rings, voice dripping with fake concern. "Finally come to your senses." "Actually," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I called to tell you that what you did today was unforgivable." "Oh please, just slip." "And the pig comment was a joke." "We both know that's not true," I said firmly. "And even if it were a joke that humiliates and hurts a child isn't a joke. It's just cruelty with a coward's excuse." "Excuse me." Her voice sharpened. "You heard me. I'm not doing this anymore, Stephanie. The body shaming, constant digs, using your daughters to bully mine. It ends now. You're being ridiculous." "No, what's ridiculous is that I've let this go on for so long. And with that, decades of buried hurt spilled out of me. When we were kids, you called me piggy until I cried myself to sleep. You accidentally tore my prom dress because someone asked me instead of you. You wore white to my wedding. And now you've turned around and done the same thing to my daughter." "Oh please," she scoffed. "Ancient history. And completely exaggerated." "It's not exaggerated to Grace," I said, my voice rising. "Who's upstairs right now, scrubbing mud out of her hair because her aunt shoved her down the patio steps." There was a pause. Then she responded, her voice cold and bitter. "If you're so perfect, why'd you let Michael fight your battles today? Still can't stand up for yourself after all these years?" "No, Michael stepped in because that's what love looks like. It's not weakness, it's support. We protect the people we care about. That's what you're supposed to do." From the hallway, I noticed Grace standing in her robe, quietly listening. Her wide eyes told me she had heard everything. "Well," Stephanie snapped, "enjoy your sad little Thanksgiving with your sad little family. We're having pie with people who know how to take a joke." "Enjoy your pie," I said. "Because after this call, I'm blocking your number. If you ever want a relationship with me or Grace, you'll need to offer a real apology and actually change. Until then, stay away from us." And before she could say another word, I hung up and blocked her. Then I blocked my parents too. Because enabling toxic behavior is just as harmful. Grace stepped closer, her voice small. "Did you really just block Grandma and Grandpa?" "For now," I said, feeling a flicker of uncertainty. "I think we all need some time and space. To think. To heal." That's when Michael came around the corner in sweatpants and a hoodie, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "Everything okay?" I heard part of that call. I nodded slowly. I told Stephanie the truth. Blocked her. And I blocked my parents too. Instead of looking shocked, Michael handed me one of the mugs and gently smiled. "Good," he said. "It's about time someone finally did." Michael just nodded. "It's about time. But they're still family," Grace said softly. Michael walked over and crouched to her level. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "family is supposed to make you feel safe and loved. People who purposely hurt you don't get access to your life just because you're related. DNA doesn't equal respect. Grace thought about that for a moment. So, what happens now? No more Thanksgiving or Christmas with them. Ever. I don't know, honey, I admitted honestly. That depends on whether they can recognize what they did and actually change. But what I do know is, we're not going to pretend things are okay when they're not. Grace sighed. I'm kind of hungry. We didn't really eat much. Michael smiled. Well, we've got everything we need to make a real Thanksgiving dinner. What do you say we make our own version? And so we did. Still in our cozy clothes, we worked together in the kitchen putting together a simplified, no-drama version of the holiday meal. Michael handled the turkey breast while Grace and I made mashed potatoes and roasted veggies. We played music, told stories, and slowly, bit by bit, the stress started to lift. By the time we sat down to our impromptu dinner, the mood was light, even joyful. We used our everyday plates instead of the fancy stuff, poured sparkling cider into mismatched cups, and toasted to the kind of family that chooses love. Afterward, we hung out in the living room playing board games, something we'd never been allowed to do at my parents' house, where everything after dinner was strict and scripted. Grace laughed, really laughed, for the first time that day when Michael lost epically at Monopoly. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a message from someone I didn't expect. My cousin Patricia. Just wanted to check if Grace is okay. What Stephanie did today was awful. No one knew what to say, but that's no excuse. I'm sorry. I showed the message to Michael. Should I respond? That's your call, he said. But it sounds sincere. So I replied. Grace is okay now. Thank you for checking, and for acknowledging what happened. Patricia replied almost instantly. I should have spoken up. My daughter Zoe told me she's seen Stephanie's girls be mean to Grace at other gatherings too. She was scared to say anything. If you're open to it, maybe Zoe and Grace could hang out sometime, outside of family events. That unexpected gesture brought tears to my eyes. Even as some family bonds were cracking, others were beginning to form in a healthier way. Over the next few days, more messages came in from extended family. Some were supportive. Others were more about keeping the peace. My parents left increasingly frustrated voicemails, accusing me of tearing the family apart over a misunderstanding. I deleted every one of them without responding. But the biggest surprise came a week after Thanksgiving. I opened the front door, and there was Stephanie standing on the porch alone, looking uncharacteristically unsure of herself. What are you doing here? I asked, making no move to let her in. I came to talk, she said. Can I come inside? No, I said firmly. Say what you need to say from there. She blinked, clearly not used to being told no. Fine, she muttered. I came to apologize. I guess. You guess. I raised an eyebrow. She sighed. Look, maybe I was out of line with Grace. I shouldn't have pushed her. That's not an apology, I said flatly. That's a weak excuse with a side of denial. What do you actually want, Stephanie? Her expression cracked. To admit I've been awful to you our whole lives. Is that what you want to hear? I don't need anything from you, I replied. You showed up here uninvited. But if you want any kind of future relationship with me or Grace, then yes, you need to own all of it. Not just what happened last week. The whole pattern. She looked at me for a long time before finally saying, You've changed. I have, I said without flinching. Stephanie turned and walked back to her car. And as she drove away, I didn't feel victorious or bitter. It was clear. I was finally setting boundaries that should have been in place a long time ago. The real surprise came about a month later, in the form of a letter. A real, handwritten letter, from Stephanie. I opened it cautiously, expecting more deflection or guilt-tripping. But what I found was something else. I've been seeing a therapist since Thanksgiving, she wrote. She's helping me face patterns I didn't want to see. The truth is, I've always been jealous of you, your creativity, your kindness, and especially how Michael loves you unconditionally. Mom and Dad put so much pressure on me to be perfect. I thought the only way to stay on top was to tear you down. It's not an excuse, but maybe it helps explain things. She continued. I'm truly sorry for what I did to Grace. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet for coffee sometime. Just us. I sat with that letter for a few days before sharing it with Michael. Then we talked about whether or not to respond. Eventually, I decided to take a cautious step forward. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. Neutral ground. When I walked in, I spotted Stephanie already seated at a table. She looked smaller somehow, not just physically, but without her usual confidence or her crowd of admirers. Thanks for coming, she said as I sat down. Your letter caught me off guard, I admitted. It surprised me too, she replied more honestly than I expected. Writing it forced me to face things I've been ignoring for years. What followed was the most real conversation we'd ever had. Stephanie opened up about the constant pressure she felt growing up, the impossible expectations our parents placed on her. I shared how their constant comparisons and dismissal shaped my own self-worth. We cried, we laughed awkwardly, and for the first time we actually saw each other. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, Stephanie said as we got ready to leave. But I'd like the chance to be a better sister. And a better aunt to Grace. That'll take time, I told her. And it's going to take more than words. She nodded. I know. I'm willing to do the work. If you're willing to leave the door open. Even just a crack. As winter faded into spring, small steps followed. Stephanie and I met for coffee a few more times. She sent Grace a thoughtful birthday gift along with a handwritten apology. My parents were slower to come around, still clinging to the idea that we should all move on from Thanksgiving without addressing the real issues. But even they started to realize the old dynamic had shifted, and that it wasn't going back. 6 months after that chaotic Thanksgiving, we agreed to a small get-together. Just us, Stephanie's family, and our parents, at a neutral restaurant, not anyone's house. The vibe was cautious. Conversations were polite, maybe a little stiff. But no passive-aggressive jabs. No rude comments. Grace even got sincere praise on her latest art project from both grandparents, and most surprisingly from Emma and Lily. It seemed like they were trying, following their mom's lead. It wasn't perfect. Kept my boundaries clear. But it was a start. The road to healing wasn't smooth. There were moments when old habits crept back in. Times I wondered if any of this effort was worth it. But 3 things stayed constant: Michael's unwavering support, Grace's incredible resilience, and my own growing determination to break the toxic cycle I grew up in. 2 weeks after the Thanksgiving blow-up, I started therapy. I knew I needed help unpacking all the emotional baggage I'd carried for so long. My therapist helped me see how deeply I had internalized the idea that my worth depended on my appearance and achievements. But more importantly, she gave me tools, strategies for setting boundaries, challenging those ingrained beliefs, and rebuilding my sense of self. The goal isn't to erase the past, she said during one emotional session. It's to make sure it doesn't control your future, or Grace's. Grace, meanwhile, was working through her own feelings about that day. At first, she had nightmares about falling, being laughed at. But we talked about it often and openly. Over time, she started to reframe it. Not as something that made her less, but as something that revealed more about them. "Aunt Stephanie was really mean," she said one night while we were baking cookies. "But I think maybe she's just really sad inside to act that way." Her insight floored me. At 12, she already had a level of emotional understanding that had taken me decades to reach. Michael had a suggestion. We should start new family traditions, ones that made us feel connected and at peace, not judged or tense. So we launched Family Adventure Sundays. Some weeks we'd go hiking or visit a museum. Other times we just stay in, cook something new, or play board games. No pressure. No pretending. When Christmas came around, we made another big shift. We politely declined my parents' invitation and booked a cozy mountain cabin for just the 3 of us. "You sure?" Michael asked, as I typed the email to my parents. "This is a big move." "I'm sure," I told him. "Maybe someday we'll be ready to celebrate the holidays together again. But right now, what Grace needs most are positive, healthy memories." And that Christmas in the mountains became one of my favorites. We built snowmen, sipped hot chocolate by the fire, and exchanged meaningful gifts without any pressure, performance, or comparison. Grace seemed lighter, laughing more freely than she had in months. Then, in January, an unexpected letter arrived, from my dad. Unlike my mom's ongoing texts demanding we let it go without ever acknowledging what happened, my dad's letter showed the first signs of real self-awareness. "I've been thinking about Thanksgiving," he wrote, "and a lot of other moments before that. I didn't protect you when you were a kid, and I didn't protect Grace either. I don't know if I can change at this stage in life, but I want you to know. I see now that I failed you in ways that mattered." It wasn't a total reckoning, but it was a start. I called him the next day, and we had our first truly honest conversation as adults. He cried when I explained how it felt growing up as the family disappointment. "I never meant for you to feel that way," he said. "I thought pushing you would make you stronger." "It didn't," I replied. "It made me question my worth. And I'm finally working to change that, for me and for Grace." Stephanie's own journey toward growth continued too, though not without some slip-ups. After our coffee shop meeting, she made a real effort to change. She called sometimes just to ask about Grace's art or my work, and it felt sincere. At one gathering, she made a snide remark about my jeans, then immediately caught herself and apologized without being prompted. Even more importantly, she started parenting differently. I saw her gently correct Lily when she made a rude comment about another girl's appearance, explaining why that kind of talk hurts people. Watching her hold her daughters accountable was something I never thought I'd see. By spring, we felt ready to try a small family dinner. We picked a restaurant with a private room and laid out clear expectations beforehand. There were still awkward silences, but for the first time in years, no one cried or left early. Grace kept her distance from Emma and Lily at first, unsure of how to interact. But when she brought up her upcoming art show, Emma surprised us by asking genuine questions about her process. By dessert, the 3 of them were showing each other phone photos and even laughing a little. "They're not so bad when they're not being mean," Grace said on the way home. "People can change," Michael said, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. "Especially when they realize what they stand to lose." That summer, we got an invitation I never thought we'd see. My parents wanted to rent a beach house and have the whole family stay together. My first instinct, hard no. But after some conversations with Michael and Grace, we agreed, on our terms. We booked a nearby hotel for space and control, and only committed to staying 3 days, not the full week. And you know what? Those 3 days changed something. Sure, there were still a few tense moments and familiar patterns trying to sneak back in, but there were also real signs of progress. My dad took Grace fishing and listened as she told him about her dream of becoming an artist. My mom, while still occasionally critical, made visible efforts to be kind and encouraging. And the biggest surprise, Stephanie pulled me aside on our last night and said, "I'm sorry it took me so long to realize how much I was hurting you. Thank you for giving me a second chance." Driving home from that beach trip, I thought about how far we'd come in just 8 months. This family still had its flaws. There were wounds still healing, trust still rebuilding, but for once it felt real. And Grace. She was learning the lessons I'd only come to understand in adulthood. That love shouldn't come with conditions. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish. That even family needs boundaries sometimes. As I drove, Grace spoke from the back seat. Mom. Yeah, honey. I think I'm kind of glad Aunt Stephanie pushed me into that puddle last Thanksgiving. I glanced at her in the mirror, startled. You are. She nodded, thoughtful. If it hadn't happened, everything would still be fake. We'd still be pretending stuff was okay when it wasn't. And I might have grown up thinking families are just supposed to treat you like that. Michael reached over and gently squeezed my hand as I blinked back tears. Out of one of the most painful experiences of our lives came the most important truth. Real family isn't about appearances, tradition, or obligation. It's about protecting one another, being honest even when it's hard, and having the courage to grow together. That muddy Thanksgiving wasn't just a breaking point. It was a breakthrough. We stopped accepting crumbs of conditional affection, and started demanding the love and respect we truly deserve. The path forward wasn't always easy, but it was real. For the first time in my life, we were choosing what family meant for us. If you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members, how did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if this story hit home for you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for the people who need to learn how to love you the right way.
Thanks for listening. Share your opinion in comment section, and also do like and subscribe to the channel.